I found a wedding ring in my husband's jacket pocket on a Tuesday afternoon, and it wasn't mine. Let me say that again because it took me a solid 45 seconds standing in our laundry room to fully process what I was holding in my hand. A plain gold band. Thin, simple, the kind you buy when you want something that looks humble, unremarkable. The kind of ring that isn't supposed to exist in your marriage when you're already wearing yours on your left hand, right where it's been for 11 years. Marcus had been gone for 3 days. 3 days with his phone going straight to voicemail after the second hour. 3 days of me texting into what felt like a black hole, watching those little delivered receipts sit there unread. 3 days of telling our 9-year-old daughter Lily that Daddy was just really busy with work, while I sat in the kitchen at 2 in the morning refreshing his location on Find My Friends, which he'd apparently turned off sometime Friday evening. 3 days of calling his office and being told, cheerfully, by the receptionist, that Marcus had taken personal time off. Personal time off that he had never mentioned to me. Not once. He came home Sunday evening like he'd simply stepped out for a long errand, kissed me on the cheek, said he was exhausted, threw his clothes in the hamper and went to bed by 9. I didn't sleep. I lay next to him in the dark listening to him breathe, wondering who that man was. Monday morning I did the laundry, and there it was, tucked into the small coin pocket of his dark khakis, the ones he'd been wearing when he walked through our front door. A gold ring, about a size 10, a man's ring. I set it on the center of our dining room table, right next to the salt and pepper shakers, right in the spot where he'd sat for 11 years of dinners. And then I cooked. I made pasta. I helped Lily with her homework. I gave her a bath. I read her 2 chapters of her book. I put her to bed, and then I sat down at the table and I waited. Marcus came downstairs at 7:30 to eat. He pulled out his chair. He looked at his plate. He reached for his fork. And then he saw it. I watched the color leave his face the way you watch water drain from a tub. Slow at first, then all at once. He didn't pick it up. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stared at it, and I stared at him, and the silence in that room was louder than anything I had ever heard in my life. "Where did you find that?" he finally said. Not, "What is that?" Not, "Whose ring is this?" Not, "I can explain." Where did you find that? Because he already knew exactly what it was. I want to tell you who Marcus was before I tell you who he turned out to be. Because if I don't, you won't understand how completely the ground fell out from under me. You won't understand why I spent 11 years building a life around a man who was apparently building something else entirely on the side. I was 27 when we got married. Marcus was 31. He was an architect. He had this particular way of explaining things, this patience with details, that made me feel like he saw the world more carefully than other people did. We met at a friend's birthday dinner in Atlanta, and he spent 45 minutes telling me about the way natural light changes the emotional experience of interior space, and I thought, this is a man who pays attention. This is a man who notices things. I gave up a marketing director position in Chicago to move to Savannah when he got a partnership offer at a firm there. We bought a house on a quiet street with a big porch. We had Lily. I transitioned to freelance consulting work so I could be more present for her, which meant my income dropped significantly, and his career became the financial spine of our family. I was 38 years old, and I was proud of the life we had built. I trusted him completely. That is the most humiliating sentence I have ever said out loud. Marcus traveled for work. That was real. Architecture firms do send people on site, to client meetings, to projects in other cities. So when the trips started increasing, I didn't immediately question it. Once a month became every other week. He was busy. The firm was growing. I told myself this was success, and success sometimes looks like absence. The first thing I noticed that I refused to fully register was a receipt. January of last year. A restaurant in Charleston, table for two, $214. On a Tuesday night when he'd told me he was at a project meeting that would run through dinner. I asked him about it. He said a client had joined him and he'd expensed the whole thing. I believed him. Or I told myself I did. The second thing was a text notification I saw by accident in April when his phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. The contact name was just an initial, a single letter, R. The preview said, "Miss you already." I saw it for maybe 3 seconds before the screen went dark. I stood there for a long time. When Marcus came downstairs, I didn't say anything. I don't know why. I think I knew that asking would break something I wasn't ready to have broken yet. The third thing was a hotel points statement that came to the house in May. A paper statement because Marcus was old-fashioned about certain things. He'd accumulated over 40,000 points. 40,000 points at a rate that requires serious, consistent stays. Marcus traveled, yes. But the number I was looking at didn't match the business trips I'd been told about. It matched something much more deliberate. I saved that statement. I don't know what made me do it, but I took it from the mail before he got home, and I put it in a folder in the back of my desk drawer. And then in August, he disappeared for 3 days. So when he sat across from that ring on the dining room table and said, "Where did you find that?" I wasn't asking the question of a woman who knew nothing. I was asking it as a woman who had quietly been connecting dots for 7 months and had just been handed the final piece. "It was in your pants pocket," I said. "The khakis you were wearing when you came home last night. You want to tell me whose it is?" He picked it up. He held it. He set it back down. "It's not what you think." I actually laughed. Not a mean laugh, a disbelieving one. An, "I cannot believe that sentence just came out of your mouth" laugh. "Marcus," I said very quietly. "A man's wedding ring was in your pocket. You were gone for 3 days with your phone off. Please, for the love of everything we have built together, do not tell me it's not what I think." He tried 4 different versions of a story in the next 30 minutes. The ring belonged to a colleague who had asked him to hold it. He'd found it somewhere and meant to turn it in. He'd bought it as a gift for his brother and hadn't had a chance to give it to him. With each version, his eyes shifted left, slightly. The same direction they always moved when he wasn't being truthful. Something I had noticed years ago and filed away as a cute tell during board games, and never once imagined I would need to know in a context like this one. After the 4th version, I stood up from the table. "Stop talking," I said. "Please, just stop." I went upstairs. I sat on the bathroom floor for a while. I cried the ugly kind of crying. The kind where you press your back against the bathtub and you hold your own knees, and you grieve the version of your life that isn't real anymore. I was 38 years old, and I was sitting on a tile floor understanding that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a construction, and the architect had been my husband. I cried for exactly 1 night, because the next morning I woke up and something had shifted in me. The grief was still there. It didn't go anywhere. But underneath it, something cold and focused had come online. I had a daughter. I had a house that was partially in my name. I had years of financial records and a folder in my desk drawer with a hotel point statement that told a very different story than the one Marcus had been living in our home. I didn't confront him again. I smiled at breakfast. I said I needed some time to process. I said I loved him, and I just needed a few days to wrap my head around things. He was visibly relieved, which told me everything about how much he had underestimated me. 2 days later, I called a friend of mine who had gone through a difficult divorce 3 years earlier. I asked her one question. Who was her lawyer? She didn't ask why. She just said his name and told me he was expensive and worth every single dollar. I had that appointment set within 48 hours. His name was Daniel Forsyth. He had been practicing family law in Georgia for 22 years. He wore a tie every day and had absolutely no patience for sentimentality during a consultation. He listened to everything I told him, asked me approximately 47 questions, and at the end looked at me and said, "You need to give me 60 days and do exactly as I say." I gave him 60 days. During those 60 days, I made copies of every financial document in our home. Tax returns going back 6 years, bank statements, the mortgage, his business partnership agreement, every credit card statement I could find, and the hotel point statement from May, which Daniel looked at and said would be very useful. I hired a private investigator named Anita, a referral from Daniel's office, who was 53 years old and had the energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed her job. She found out in 11 days that R was a woman named Renee, 31 years old, a yoga instructor who lived in Charleston. They had been together for 2 years and 8 months. And the ring, the gold band I found in Marcus's pocket, was Renee's idea. They had done a private commitment ceremony at a beachside rental house in Hilton Head the weekend he was supposedly unreachable. He had come home wearing the ring she'd given him, and then taken it off before he walked in the door and forgotten it in his pocket. Forgot it in his pocket. Anita had photographs. She had timestamps. She had everything Daniel needed. Here is the part that still makes my hands shake. Not with grief anymore, but with fury. Renee knew Marcus was married. She knew about Lily. And she had apparently told Marcus that she was fine with the arrangement as long as she got the Charleston weekends and the 4-day trips to Asheville and the $3,400 a month he had been transferring to a Venmo account she held under a business name. $3,400 a month for 28 months. Which Daniel's forensic accountant calculated came to $95,200, pulled from various accounts, some of which were joint marital accounts, some of which were business accounts that had implications for his partnership. $95,200. I waited until a Tuesday morning. Marcus had a 9 o'clock meeting at his firm that I knew from his calendar, which he had never thought to stop sharing with me. I dressed carefully. I drove to his office building on Drayton Street. I sat in the lobby. At 9:47, his meeting let out. I watched him come through the conference room door, laughing at something a colleague had said. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who believed his life was intact. He saw me, and the laughter stopped. I stood up. I was holding a manila envelope, and I held it out to him in the middle of the lobby with 4 of his colleagues in earshot. "You've been served," I said. Those 3 words, in that voice, in that room. He grabbed my arm. He pulled me toward a corner. "Mara, what are you doing? Can we please talk about this?" "We are done talking," I said. "We talked 11 years ago, and everything you told me was a lie you were still building. My attorney will be in touch." I walked out of that building, and I sat in my car, and I called Lily's school to make sure she was having a good day. She was. She was at recess. She was fine. The divorce took 8 months. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, and what Daniel built was airtight. The $95,200 in marital funds diverted to Renee was documented and presented. The marriage was 11 years old. I had reduced my earning capacity specifically to support our family structure. I got the house. I got primary custody of Lily with generous visitation for Marcus. I got a settlement amount that I will not say out loud on the internet except to tell you it was fair, and it was everything. Marcus's partnership at the firm became complicated once the financial misconduct documentation was part of the legal record. He is no longer a partner there. I heard through someone we both know that Renee did not stay with him once the money situation changed. I cannot say I was surprised. I live in our house. Lily and I have a routine that is ours. I took my freelance work full-time, and I picked up 3 new clients last year. I wake up in the morning and the silence in my house is not lonely. It is clean. It belongs to me. The ring, that gold band, I put it in an envelope and mailed it to the firm where Marcus used to be a partner, with a note that said, "Found this in the laundry." It seemed like something someone should return. I am not angry anymore. I want to be clear about that. The anger burned off a long time ago, and what's left is something I didn't expect. A kind of clarity about exactly who I am and exactly how much I am capable of. I chose my daughter. I chose honesty. I chose to be the woman who does not fall apart, who sits across from a dining room table with a wedding ring that isn't hers and quietly decides what happens next. Marcus forgot a ring in his pocket. That was the only mistake he made. One mistake, after 28 months of nearly perfect deception. It was enough.